In the summer of 2023, my friends hated me. I would always suggest a game to play or a show to watch, but when they recommended something to me, I said, yeah, I'll give it a shot, just to play a 100-hour-long RPG for the 7th time, or waste time modding some random game I've played before.
Oh god.
Is it gonna be Naked Chris? Fucking Naked Chris.
Sorry.
But eventually I got bored of what I had, so I suggested a list that anyone can edit and add whatever they wanted me to play, watch, or listen to. With the list piled high, I said, you know what? I'm gonna start knocking this out. So I began with a game here and a show there. I was on a roll. Then one of them said, hey, you know a game named Trails in the Sky on my list? You should play that next. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I might have spent the next 6 months straight playing through the entire series without touching anything else. I was addicted to the story, the gameplay, everything. The game is peak, and no one knows about it. It's crazy. But instead of talking about the whole series and spoiling everything, I want to talk about the most recent game that people say is the best game in the series, Trails Through Daybreak. This series, having this amount of players, this many reviews, is criminal. I mean, it's big in Japan, but in the West, come on, man. We are sleeping on these games, people. This man is shedding blood, sweat, and tears to bring us Game of Thrones, but in game form, and no one's playing it. The only thing I can think of is it's the One Piece effect, where it's 1,000 chapters long, and it's like, hell no, I'm not getting into that. But in this case, it's a game where each one's playtime is like 30 to 100 hours, and they're all chronological, so you have to play them all sequentially. But then again, Daybreak is the 11th game in the Legend of Heroes Trail series, and this is the latest game in the release in the West. In Japan, they're on Crimson Sin, which, like, I'm in a crisis because I can't get my hands on it. I would say before anything, this might be the only point in the series where you can start midway through, besides maybe Cold Steel 1. With how the story and characters are structured, it's really its own concise story, but you would be missing out on an immense amount of context, lore, and character details that you might not have moments like these. Oh my god. Oh my god.
I've got this.
Oh my god.
Good to see you too.
I know this guy! What is he doing here? He's from the Organization 13. This game and series is known for being some of the best RPGs you can play, with a deep lore that spans numerous games and that rewards you for sticking with them. In this video, I won't be going over anything that I think is spoilers, but I want to try to explain the magic of the game and why it needs to be more popular. And I don't want to be a strictly JRPG channel, but I had to make a video on this one, then I'll move on to something a little different. But for now, let's become the nightmare. The game opens in a sprawling, shady night where we phase through the ground and see a fight breaking out between a local gang and a couple of mafia goons. There's a trade going on between them. One wants money and the other, an object of unknown origin. An argument breaks out, and before things get ugly, they get routed by the cops and disperse. Not before the briefcase holding the loot gets stolen, and from some invisible man. At the same time, there's a man cloaked in blue, loitering around in a local cafe, checking his phone before mentioning that he smells something brewing. While a girl in pink is checking a website for an object that was stolen, before stumbling on the words 4SPG and Spriggan. The next morning, she arrives at the same damn, that's a GPS, bro. Damn, that's a GPS?
That's right.
Turns out the same man works right above the cafe, in an office labeled Arkwright Solutions. And she rushes up the stairs to meet the man, the myth, the legend, Van Arkwright. First impressions real quick is for an anime game, and it is an anime game made in Japan, so let's set that on the table now. The presentation is really nice, especially if you're playing the games in order. I mean, going from Cold Steel 1 to this is a really nice upgrade. And Reverie was a fantastic looking game in my opinion. There are really nice physics for all the objects and characters in the game. The cutscenes themselves are nicely animated, and the city and towns that you will be visiting throughout the game have some nice detailing that not many anime games pay attention to. Not that too many play the series for the graphics, but I digress. JRPG wise, it's like a solid A quality for the graphics, if AAA is FF on PS5 or something, minus the skyboxes. Along with the graphics, the game's translation is actually really solid. Probably my favorite in the series. Whoever did it was phenomenal, and if it's the same people, I'm sorry. It just feels very modern. They use language that fits in the year 2024, but not to the extent of dating the game after a couple of years. And even though the game has its anime moments of characters waiting for each other and the... For lack of a better word, it feels less staged? Is that the word? Acted? I'll say cringe. We'll say cringe. We learn that the blonde girl is named Agnes, and she is seeking help to find an heirloom that stems from her family. And the reason she is seeking out Van is because he fits somewhere in between the law and lawlessness, the legal and illegal. He is known as a Spriggan, a profession not many people take up because of their shady practices and overall riding on the line of what is morally right and wrong. When a customer has needs that they can't necessarily go to a guild or police station for, they turn to the next option, and Van perfectly fits that role as a bounty hunter, thief, detective, or whatever role he needs to fill. Van tries to tell her to go to the guild for something so measly as finding an heirloom, but she refuses, stating only that she just can't. Without giving Van much to go off of, he reluctantly accepts, especially when Agnes whips out a bag of sweets, Van's one true weakness.
It's Andalusia's late summer limited time edition. The specially made tart covered in Violette de Soleil figs from Oregon honey.
Wanting to get the job done quickly, they set out right away to the 6th district to speak to a shady man that Van knows who might have some information that could prove useful to them. And would you look at that, he kinda looks familiar, don't he? After a conversation with the man known as Giacomo, they come up empty-handed, but not without a few thoughts. Van knows that Giacomo has seen the heirloom and is hiding something that he doesn't want to tell them. What Van surmises is the truth, because Giacomo was the invisible figure in the beginning who stole the briefcase, which might hold what they're searching for, and wanting to sell to the highest bidder, he runs away feigning ignorance. And that leads Van and Agnes trailing after him into the sewers, where one of his hideouts lie. Upon entering the sewer tunnel, Van tells Agnes to leave, considering he's the only one he can fight since the place is crawling with monsters. Not to be dissuaded, Agnes reveals an Orbital staff that she is compatible with, and though she has no combat experience, she would play support and stay out of harm's way. Van concedes, and they make their way through the tunnel to find Giacomo. And this is when the game opens up to combat. Daybreak is a turn-based JRPG boasting a great amount of magic options as well as attack-based options via CP, with some action elements that I will get into in a second. You control up to 4 people, and later even some people on the bench, against a number of opponents who, like most RPGs, have weaknesses you can exploit and ailments you can dish out to give you the advantage. The combat can take a little getting used to because of you not having to only manage the skills you want to throw out, but the position you want to be in. As this JRPG has a little tactics touch in the sense of you have an area you can move your character, and that will affect many spells and attacks because of positionals and bonuses from being near your party members and enemies. Along with turn-based, they added a new form of combat in this iteration of the game called Field Battle, where you can literally just fight like an action game. It's not super in-depth, and there's not much of it besides throwing out attacks and a heavy swing here and there, but the reason to use this is to build the stun gauge on enemies. That way when you begin a battle against them, you will start with the advantage, granting you various bonuses and a little damage to boot. Though later in the game, some enemies are much weaker that you can literally just kill them, but that depends on what kind of difficulty you're on. Another aspect of the combat in this game ties into the major time spender of the series, which luckily they didn't make as daunting in this version of the mechanic, and that is the orbment system. Through the orbment system, you can fashion builds, passives, and buffs alike, along with changing what arts you're able to cast and how effective they will be. When slotting orbments, depending on which skill you slot in, whether it be defense, attack, or hit for example, they will all provide a cumulative counter that grants various boons to your build, depending on which combination of skills you selected. These little squares and circles here are all important, and in certain spots they become more effective in providing boosts to your overall build, sometimes doubling the amount of boosts you receive. And once you start racking up some of those crazy passives, you'll become pretty cracked pretty quickly. There's also a surprise a little bit later in the game in the form of a new ability, but I'm gonna save that for a little bit later. As we were making our way through the sewer, we cut to Giacomo entering his hideout, with some mafioso ambushing him. We hear a scream and think it's him, so Van and Agnes rush to Giacomo to find out that he's been murdered. As Agnes is taking the news, Van is cornered by some police that were conveniently called around the same time, and since they were near the body, they were taken into custody for questioning. During the interrogation, Van gives up nothing and is told by the detectives that he's not to be trusted. But before anything happens, a Mr. Rene Kincaid shows up, a member of the CID and a trusted friend of Van since childhood. He helps get Van and Agnes released from custody, exchanges info with Van, and goes on his way. They both can tell that something strange is brewing, so there's a mutual beneficial air to the two of them, even though they're not completely on the same sides of the law. Van tells Agnes there's no reason to continue with him and to let him finish up alone, but she doesn't have any of it and is steadfast on her decision. Before they take off, a young reporter named Marielle, wanting to make a name for herself, asks Van about the events that transpired and wanted to see about getting info for a story. He lies and says that the detective Nate knows a lot and should go ask him, just to get her away from the situation. Van goes to the local bar where Bermati is serving up some local guests. As a bartender and informant for Van, he's very handy when it comes to cases like these. Bermati says that Giacomo had multiple hideouts, and since the heirloom was not in the first hideout, it's where he most likely has the goods. Dingo says hey, and the two walk out to a familiar face that's been mighty popular as of late. Elaine Alclair, the youngest A-rank bracer, local celebrity, and childhood friend of Van's, which they seem to have some history together. Elaine tells Van to be careful and he says, "Nuh-uh!" On the train to the next hideout, Van is basically forcing Agnes to leave the case now, as it's getting way too dangerous, with the mafioso, cops, and monsters running around, not to mention high-profile members of the CID, and reporters like Marielle and Dingo on the case as well. She refuses, again. She claims that, yes, it's her case and it's her heirloom they're looking for, but she's a part of this case now for bad or for worse. A man is dead, and she feels guilty as she's never been exposed to anything like this, and she wants to see it through. Van, once again, falls to the girl's words and lets her join, on the condition that she listens to every order of his no matter what. As they make their way around to the next hideout, we also catch a glimpse of a girl who seems very mysterious. Very mysterious indeed. At the end of the dungeon, we get to the amulet and it's guarded by two gargoyles, which begins our first boss fight and allows us to finally use our S-crafts, essentially our ultimate.
Time for the main event!
After the fight, we get our hands on the Genesis finally, but not before getting ambushed by the same mafioso from when Giacomo was killed. Van easily dispatches the two, but they have a trick up their sleeve, an illegal drug that boosts their power tenfold and makes them lose control. As Van is on the back foot, the Genesis reacts and somehow freezes time, in which Mare, the AI inside Van's orbit system, jumps out and seems to have a will of her own. To save the situation, she asks Van if he wants to become the Nightmare, and he transforms into a being known as the Grendel and mops the floor with the mafioso. Afterwards, they gather their thoughts, so Elaine and Kincaid arrive on the scene to gather info and support. Van is injured, so they make their way back to the office with more questions than anything. Van and Agnes are surprised at how fast he's healing, and it might have something to do with the Genesis. As they're talking, Agnes opens up about her past, her motivations, and also the diary that was passed down from her grandfather. She explained that it was more about his life than anything, except for one of the final messages in the book that has always scared her. It said, "Recover the Oct Genesis before the year 120X, else all we know will come to an end." She explained that a girl she goes to school with helped her find Van, and again why she needs to see this through, even alone if she must, and offers Van 50,000 mira for payment. Van turns down the money, saying that it's way too much for the service he provided, and told her the mission wasn't over in the first place, and if she is still gonna look, he will pitch in to support her as well. He then goes to end the day by eating the dessert Agnes brought with her earlier in the day, not before he's cut off by her, saying she will join Arkwright Solutions as a secretary and do paperwork and other odds and ends to help while she's taking advantage of his services. He doesn't like this and complains. And that's the setup for Daybreak. The day ends, we get our end results, and prepare for the journey ahead to find the 6 other Genesis. And along the way, you will meet many more characters. Party member wise, Fairy and Aaron to name a couple, but that's not even half the amount of allies you get in the game, as all roads eventually combine into a highway. You will get a new member of Arkwright Solutions every chapter, so your party will always be evolving and covering a base of some sort. The game, compared to the rest of the Trail series, is pretty vulgar when it comes to language, and it's pretty dark when it comes to some of the heavier topics the series has seen. But the game's rated T, so maybe I'm tripping, but when they bring up certain groups in the game, some gore getting thrown on the screen, or Aaron dropping some one-liners, it makes me think otherwise. Trails Through Daybreak is a phenomenal game that may not continue the overarching plot of the series, but is a godsend in a collection so long it spans 12 games, right now with a 13th on the way. A game that I can recommend to someone who wants to play the series but doesn't want to commit or wants to dip their toe in the water and see if it's right for them. not to mention it having the best combat in the series to date next to Reverie. The soundtrack is fire. The locations are fire, the story is fire, the characters are fire. And so, with all that said, I'm gonna give this game a go play the entire series right now because you don't know what you're missing. I promise it's peak. I mean, you could start with this game if you really want to, and if that will get you into the series, then so be it. But if you want to be an Omega Chad, maybe start with Trails in the Sky. But anyway, game's fire out of. Hey yo, Future Super here. You thought this video was over? It's not, son. Look at this. Trails in the Sky 1 just got announced for a remake recently, and even though this video is mainly for Daybreak, this is the perfect opportunity to put the message out there to play the series now! You can get the series on sale now, so it's the best time to experience this peak JRPG series. I mean, honestly, thinking about it, the series getting a remake is crazy since the games are still coming out, but like, I'm not gonna complain, new games. In Trails 1, you get to experience the journey of Estelle and Joshua as they become full-fledged racers and struggle to fight against a society of bad mother truckers. Not only is 1 very rich in world building, but it is, well, it's the first one, so it's a phenomenal way to get into the game. And if you wanted to wait, you can, but if not, it's the perfect way to get into the series, baby. Play the series now, bro! I'm begging you, please, bro! This isn't